All right, you can go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this month's Water Program Team webinar. I'm Ted Grantham and very pleased to introduce this month's speaker, Dr. Julie Ekstrom. She is the manager of the California Department of Water Resources New Water Justice Office and is also the lead for DWR's implementation of SB 552, which is focused on improving drought water planning for or drought planning for small water suppliers and rural communities. Dr. Ekstrom is an environmental systems social scientist with a focus on the connections between human and natural systems and joined DWR in 2018 after doing some work focused on climate change vulnerability and understanding barriers to climate adaptation. She has a PhD in marine sciences from UC Santa Barbara and a bachelor's of science and conservation resource studies from UC Berkeley. So um, welcome, Julie, and really looking forward to your talk.
Oh, great. Thanks, Ted. Thanks for having me today. So I'm going to just get going. So I'm going to talk today about some of the work that we're doing to fill gaps in drought resilience, try to build it up for rural communities. And there's a lot of space there. So what I wanted to go through was the three initiatives, I guess you'd call them. One is the water shortage vulnerability scoring that DWR does and maintains and updates. And this is somewhat recent. And then so I'm going to go into a little bit like where that came from and how that came about, where it is now. And then our county assistance program that is helping them with building up their drought resilience plans for domestic wells. And then talk a little bit about introduce you to the DRIP Collaborative, which is the Drought Resilience Interagency and Partners Collaborative. So it's a drought water shortage task force that's been mandated to be a standing task force for water shortage and drought for the state. But I'll explain how that all works. So some background. All of those three initiatives have all stemmed out of Senate Bill 552 that was passed in 2021. So this work really came up because of the 2012-2016 drought. As you probably remember, the Human Right to Water was also passed in 2012. So that there were a lot of impacts on rural communities in that major drought. And so there was this one piece of AB 1668, SB 606 that was passed in 2018. You may know it as the Making Conservation Way of Life Act, and that mostly focused on urban water suppliers and all the new research that was required for the state to do and the regulations that were to come that have now passed on how to improve efficiency and reduce use in urban areas, and doing some changes for their ag suppliers to prepare them for drought and overall for conservation. But there was this one little section that talked about rural communities and the impacts that happened from this 2012-2016 drought and how they were especially vulnerable and impacted by drought. And so what that piece of law did was it mandated DWR to host a process, put together an advisory group, and to focus on small water systems and domestic well communities and households on their own private surface water. So just all those that were not covered for drinking water under the Urban Water Management Planning Act. So if you're not familiar with that, I can go answer questions about that. But that is there was a law that was passed in 1983 for urban water suppliers, and it has kind of ratchet up the how they are supposed to use that to, in part, to prepare for drought, including do a water shortage contingency plan and report information to the state and keep in touch with the state about how secure their water is. But there was nothing like that in place to build a system to support small systems and domestic wells. And so this mandate was that, so it had this advisory group and was required to had two directives. One was to identify where vulnerable communities were that were at risk to water shortage and drought impacts among domestic wells and these small systems. And the second part, the other directive was to develop recommendations on how to cover these groups with some kind of water shortage contingency plan. And so those two pieces together were to be then reported back to the legislature. So that advisory group's recommendations, most of them became or like informed what was to be passed as Senate Bill 552 in 2021. And so this is what the like what came out of it, the basics. And I do have a set of like all sorts of URLs that I will paste in later, and I'll make this available if anybody's interested. But because we did a primer on what all is in SB 552, we worked DWR with the water board, worked very closely to write what it all means for these different groups. And so small systems they have all new sorts of new reporting requirements and infrastructure upgrades, and they also have to do a water shortage contingency plan. I'm not going to go into all the things that they have to do, but I can answer any questions. Um, the counties had a whole different sort of new responsibility that was to have oversight, basically, not authoritative oversight, but planning oversight for state small systems. Those are the ones that are, I think, 5 to 14 service connections. So very small system, they're called state small systems, and domestic wells in the county. So they had to put together a task force, a standing task force that has to include inviting the different water user groups and including the groundwater sustainability agencies and domestic well representatives, and just to try to make a hosted space that can talk about domestic well and state small drought impacts and issues. And that group needed to come together to put together, we call it a county drought resiliency plan for the state smalls and domestic wells in the county, or some kind of similar alternative. They can do it as part of their local hazard mitigation plan, part of their general plan, kind of their climate action plan. So they had some flexibility there. And then it pointed to the state water board to do some support for counties and small systems. And it pointed to DWR to do this water shortage vulnerability tool. What that came out of that first directive of identifying where people were vulnerable to the impacts of drought. And then we had to establish DWR was given the mandate to establish a standing interagency drought and water shortage task force. And so that's what's become the DRIP collaborative. So those three kind of buckets, and the three things I was going to talk about within this are how we are supporting the counties, and then also this water shortage vulnerability scoring. That's the first thing I'm going to go through, and then the DRIP collaborative. Maybe those numbers are wrong. So the scoring, this is what the tool looks like, and let's see if I can. I'm not sure how well I know. If I know Zoom well enough to, I'm just gonna see if I can pop this into the chat. Okay. Hopefully you can still see my screen. Let's see, hopefully that just went through. So this came about from that directive of who is vulnerable and at risk among the domestic wells and small systems and state smalls when we have a drought to drought. So it's a very big question, and it's not simple whatsoever. So what we did was we had this advisory group come together, and we worked through like kind of the vulnerability and risk frameworks, and got all the ideas that we could. We had people broke out into different groups based on if they wanted to talk about the small systems vulnerability and risk or the domestic wells, because we found it was not the same. And then just they brainstormed all the ideas, and from their experiences of working with these groups, this was closer to that major drought. And so they came up with ideas, and then we pulled them together, brought them back to them, said what data we could find, and then all talked together about where we could find different data to make different indicators, and how we could, what they wanted to see in the end was not just a flat map of the answer to the question of where is the vulnerability, but they wanted to see this turned into a tool that could be looked at over time, but also kind of tease out what was driving the vulnerability in different areas. And so we did that, and which is why that became one of the directives of SB 552, was that we maintain this, keep advancing it, and we also make it public and available through a tool so that people can access it. So this is just clips from those work group meetings, and this gives you like a little bit of a sense of the type of indicators that go into it. We separate out that we are now in our third iteration of it, or update of the scoring. We have one scoring is on the small systems, because it's very different than what how domestic wells are put in. Or we have different type of information, especially because we include some infrastructure and organizational capacity information about small systems that we don't have, of course, about domestic wells. But this gives you kind of the scope. The group really wanted to make sure that we had a full scope, so no matter where you were in the state, some areas are very concerned about wildfire risk, others are not, but we wanted to pull all of it in. Some are worried about sea level rise and saltwater intrusion into groundwater, the aquifers, and others, of course, that is not an issue, but we wanted to pool all of the information that we could to put it and make it available for for anybody. So we separated out the physical vulnerability from the social vulnerability in this score, and so this gives you some idea that, and we have a very big group that contributes to these updates, and very much appreciate it. And it's not done. So if anybody here is interested in participating and advancing this in the future, I'd love to hear from you. So we want to make it usable. This is not today's focus, but the purpose of the tool, it's all in one tool now. We used to have it separated, but we have a tutorial, have a bit of an overview, and then there are these two tabs. One gets you to the scoring and kind of the set of mind if you're interested in the domestic wells and state smalls. And then we have a separate tab that looks into the small water systems, and they have slightly different widgets, and they have little, you can click on any, like in this one, this is the small water systems tab, where you can click on any of the small water systems here, and then it will show you the information about it. You scroll down and can see kind of what is driving its score. And then also some information that comes from the Safer State Water Board's needs assessment, as just so that that's like right at your fingertips too. And then it will also include kind of additional buttons where you can go to the source of the data or some other additional information on the system. So like I said, we have two sets of scoring. I'm going to show you a few of the pictures from from the domestic wells and state small water systems. And they have some of the similarities on the physical vulnerability indicators. I think there are about 16 physical indicators, and then there are additional ones for the small systems about their organization. So here's the tab on the domestic wells and state smalls, and we have information that gets pulled in from all sorts of places. If it's in open data or in the ArcGIS online, it gets pulled into this dashboard. And we built this tool for the counties. So next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the support we're doing for the counties. But one of their first steps is to conduct a drought risk assessment for domestic wells and state smalls. So we framed this tool with exactly that in mind and are kind of helping them walk through how to do it as a baseline assessment. This is then it's at least it's information that then their task force can pull together and give input on, like that's not right, or that it looks much different in from our data, and then they can pull in their own data, but at least it gets them talking and thinking about these issues from a more holistic standpoint about what can put you at risk of being impacted by drought. And so what we do make available, this small link takes you just to the, I think I put it in the into the chat, but there's a tutorial, like I mentioned. This is from our regular DWR webpage about the tool and the scoring. So we have the regular dashboard I just showed. We have a tutorial that walks you through it. We've had we have recordings from the webinars that we did earlier this year when we released the scoring for the domestic wells, and then the separate scoring for the state or for the small water systems. And so I can get you those links if you're interested in the kind of technical walkthrough of how can you use this tool. We have a lot of people that are using it that don't have GIS on their own desktop computers, and so this saves them that lift of trying to rely on somebody else to make their maps, because you can print from it also and pull in your own data if you want to into the tool. And then we have a technical methods documentation for the scoring for both the domestic wells, for the small water systems, and for the social vulnerability index that we use. We had to reconstruct that from how the Center for Disease Control does it, and FEMA uses that too, but they were doing it at a more coarse scale than we wanted. We got it down to the block group, so that we could make it more usable especially for this county planning. So, and then all the data is available in open data in multiple different formats. Let's see, I already put that one in there. So this just breaks down the physical vulnerability of how it's looked at for domestic wells and state smalls. I'm not going to go through every single bit of this scoring because we have that recording available in a webinar and in various formats. So, but I'm happy to share more about this if anybody's interested. But we look at some pieces of projected climate change, and then we do the bulk is on looking at the current conditions and what we call episodic events. And then we also have some observed shortage that the advisory group originally really felt was important to include, even though that data is spotty, but it is like real life where people have reported being impacted by having their wells go out. And then this infrastructure bucket is always in the works, but this is kind of a susceptibility measure of where the depth of the well was based on a scenario of drought for the aquifer, where the depth of the well doesn't get to the aquifer. So that just like the basics are that we use the California's fourth climate change assessment of projected temperature. And this is just an absolute change from locally. And that is from Dave Pierce at Scripps. And then we have projected sea level rise, that is saltwater intrusion into the groundwater, the coastal aquifer. This is from Kevin Beffis, Juliet Hart, and Patrick Barnard from USGS. And then we have wildfire projections that were from Leroy Westerling at UC Merced. And so these will be these two will be updated when the fifth climate change assessment work is ready, if it's significant, if it has enough of a difference. But it's even though there's a lot of different layers that get pulled together, it's a pretty simple, non-dynamic scoring. So it does divide up the state into areas where we have the aquifers. The basin areas have a few different or additional indicators that we don't have in the fractured rock area. So we have to score them slightly different in the calculation, and then we merge them. So we have one score for each square mile grid cell of the state. And these are all by the public land survey sections. So we pulled together precipitation information. This is from the current year. This is from having multiple dry years, looking at the last 5 years. And then we have if it's in a fractured rock area, if the state water board has modeled it for an area of what its water quality risk is for domestic wells. And then if there's current saltwater intrusion, that again is from that Kevin Bethis model. And then we take the crop map or the land use map that DWR creates and looks to see where there's irrigated agriculture, what portion of the area is surrounded by irrigated agriculture. And then we also look at subsidence and if it's in an overdrafted basin and if it has chronic declining groundwater levels over the last 20 years. So these all get kind of pulled together. This just shows you a snapshot. So all of these individual indicators are available in that tool, or you can just look at the whole index all summed up together. And in the tool, you can click on any of the points on the map and see the breakdown for what score it is, and it runs from 0 to 100, and what is driving that score among all these indicators. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but we do have a bit of I'm not sure what everybody's background is here, but there's a dry well susceptibility map that DWR, the groundwater group, puts together. It's for the basin areas. And so we use that looks at the depth of domestic wells, basically to the aquifer under a scenario of drought. And it's been updated. I think there's might be 2 or 3 updates, but and it doesn't use where the dry well reports have been, but it does highly correlate where they've been. So, which is a interesting verification. But in fractured rock area, that's what the FRA is. We wanted to have some type of similar measure. And so what we did for that was to we called it competing demand in fractured rock. So if it's there, we look by square mile what the density of domestic wells are. And so if there are more than, I don't know, if it's like more than 5, it gets a higher, it gets like it will drive up the score a little bit more. If it's more than 10, it drives up the score for that single square mile grid cell. And similarly, the dry well reports that go into the My Dry Well webpage that DWR hosts, we use this and add that to the mix where the dry wells have been reported in the past. Per section, we call it the square mile grid cell. And so all that gets added up together. We've had different versions of how this gets weighted. Like I said, mathematically, it's pretty straightforward, but that each of the indicators just runs we just normalize it going from 0 to 1 for each of these, but we give it a weighting. And so the work group we had it was a good coincidence. We were developing a guidebook for counties for how to do their drought resilience planning. And so those that were especially interested in the risk scoring were really helpful in giving feedback on how we should do this weighting. And we had some thoughts too, and then what we did learn was that there isn't a single weighting scheme that's a perfect fit for everywhere in the state, because some places, some communities want to rank or weight wildfire risk much higher in the score, and then others might not even want it on the map, or just in terms of what they need to consider for their risk, because they didn't feel like they were at risk. Maybe feelings have changed in the last couple of years since we did this scoring, but we did also had different opinions about how climate change should be incorporated. We gave it a low weight, even though, of course, it's very important, but like in the moment for planning right now, we the group had felt that putting the water outages where they had actually occurred would be more telling about driving up vulnerability to future droughts. So this gives you some idea of how it was weighted. And let's see what so we also had social vulnerability. So we reconstructed the social vulnerability index that the federal government had already been doing. And it's again, a pretty straightforward measure of these. All the information comes from the census. So it's, limited to what the census does have available. But we wanted to use existing methods just to offer this information. So in the tool, so it does have an index score, but then it also offers each of these by block group that comes from the American Community Survey from the census. And so that way people like planners that are using this tool can just incorporate it in the same time as they're looking at physical vulnerability, but not blend it completely, because then the messaging, and it's really difficult to plan if you have like such an aggregate score of social and physical attributes. So we kept them separate. But just to give you some idea of what it looks like, we have socioeconomic status. We used these characteristics, but it just, these are block groups, and it runs from 0 to 100, each of the attributes. And that gets us to the small system scoring. And the addition that we have for small system scoring, it looks at the same climate change variables, current conditions and episodic events, and observed shortage, of the small system itself, but it also adds in organizational and infrastructure. And so what those, just really quick, that takes into account interties, emergency interties, if they're on a single water source, or if they have a single type, just groundwater, or just surface water, if they have a blend, if they do monitor their groundwater levels, and if their customers are metered, if they've had history of outage records in recent years, and what they report as their water level status. So it's quite a bit of information that all comes from the water board, what the systems report to the water board. So they share it with us so that we can put it in this score, and we coordinate quite closely with the water board on all of this. Organizational capacity, we also include, and this here is just a snapshot of, we developed a template for the water supply contingency plans for small systems with the water board. And this is what's prepared for them. So those were due last year to the water board, and they haven't all done them, but hopefully over time, everybody will have something on the books of what to do as drought revisits us. This just gives you some sense of there are, I think, about 2,700 small systems that we include in the tool for our analysis. not all of those are community water systems. There are 400 or so that are schools, and then there are other non-community water systems, but they're all the small systems we could get information on and had spatial data on their locations. And so you can click on any of them to get that basic vulnerability profile. Woo. Okay, so that was concentrated of overview of what that scoring and tool is. Now, the other thing important is that the counties had this new responsibility to plan for and hold this task force and keep tabs on what's going on with the state, small systems, and domestic wells. And we had heard from a lot of counties right when this law was passed and during that earlier advisory group process that this was not what they do. I mean, there are a few that had things in place, had task forces for drought, but largely they didn't deal with the state especially the domestic wells. They permit them, but after that, they didn't do the response and keep, an idea of what's going on regularly. So we wanted to help them get going on these requirements, just so that because this also benefits the state and just sort of the whole communication, trust, relationship system of responding and preparing for drought. And so what we did was we offered of course, the data and their interactive tools, and we offered training. We put together a guidebook, and this took almost a year. We had 12 counties were part of the work group, but then we had webinars about each phase of writing this guidebook together. And that helped make it realistic, because we were all sort of working from new mandates that hadn't really been done before. And then we held a lot of webinars, and the one webinar series that counties had asked us for was just after we held that set of guidebook webinars, they wanted to keep on talking and learning together. So we launched last year. We just hit 1 year, but we have a monthly webinar series for county staff to come together and learn from each other about what they're working on for their drought resilience plans, how they put together their task forces, and just that way they can share, and we can also bring in experts to talk about certain subjects to help them advance. Because what the main thing that we ended up, I guess you could say, is what we did a direct technical assistance program for those that didn't want a planning grant. So we offered a planning grant to all of them, and if they could also just take a direct technical assistance if they didn't want to have to do a state planning grant. So what that scope was really to help them form their task forces or strengthen them if they already had something, and make sure that it covered and complied with SB 552. And then to develop a drought resilience plan, it's not too specific in the law, but it does give you a pretty big scope of what counties are supposed to be including in that plan, including a response plan, a short-term, interim solutions, and then the longer-term mitigation strategy for drought and its impacts on domestic wells and state smalls. So that's a pretty big scope. And then some wanted to update their well databases. Some wanted to use this grant or assistance for outreach and coordination, others for looking more into consolidation options. So that's how that program has gone. It was a small amount per county, but it was looked at as like seed money and what we could do to get them going. So we have 35 counties that we're helping through the direct technical assistance program. We have one that has finished through that program and a few more that are close to finishing. And we have 21 counties that are signed up that are receiving grants to help support them through this drought resilience planning. So those I think we will see a lot more completed plans coming, and their task forces, they're pretty much all underway. But this is 36, or sorry, this is 56 counties. And of course, we have 58 in California. One that couldn't quite get it, get the point of contacts all set up. And then the other one is San Francisco, that is covered by San Francisco Public Utility Commission for its water supply. Okay, so that's a fun program to get to know counties and what's going on in all of them. We on our website about the county program, we have this. It does not look impressive here, but we have a whole dashboard that shows you the status of things that we update every couple months, and who's receiving what assistance and how far along they are, and who is, if they've told us who's participating in their task forces, just to give you some sense. It also includes the link to their web pages if they have one set up for their task force meetings. So I'll pop that in. Now, okay, and you already saw this data and tools as one of the addition. Oops, am I going backwards? Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is a different program, and I'm not going to talk about this. Just another way that we use the scoring has been helpful. It just is, this is a small systems water conservation assistance program that we've been offering to just a directed few systems, or several, to do direct install. But now I want to just tell you for the next 5-10 minutes about the DRIP Collaborative. So the Drought Resilience Interagency and Partners Collaborative was set up under Water Code. This is again SB 552, and this was to facilitate proactive state planning and coordination, the full scope of drought resilience planning and management, and to develop strategies to enhance collaboration between various fields for all types of water users. So when you read that, you realize, like, that's not a perfectly clear statement of what this task force should look like, but it was clear from the law, the other part of the law that I didn't include here, but that it needed to be state agencies and local governments, technical assistance providers. Let's see what the other ones are. So we have, there are a whole set of required groups that need to be represented in this task force. And then there were ones that we added because we knew from previous experience it was really important to have the full scope of this, all types of water users in the room together. And so previously we didn't have in California a task force for drought that is maintained and is public. So of course there are always these quick task forces that will come together for certain types of groups, or it could be internal in the state, internal in regions, internal in local governments, but then they often disappear when we have enough rain. But this one is to be standing. And so the way that we structured it is that it's a 26-member group. It's all run by the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, which means that everything is publicly noticed and the meetings are all public. So whether they're offered by Zoom, but also in person, the public can come. It's all recorded and posted to the webpage. So this group, they really rely on a network of experts for just to learn and to get sort of input, and then they can form these work groups about what do they want to work on. Once they figure out what they want to work on, they can form work groups to dig into what to do about it and develop recommendations. And those aren't permanent work groups, but so they can come and go maybe once every year. At the end of each year, we try to prepare a summary report of what they did for that year. and then provide it to the agency secretaries of the state and the governor's office. And this is on a regular schedule to run it from spring, a meeting in drought and non-drought years, spring, summer, and fall. And so the upcoming meeting is May 16th, if anybody is interested. I see, and Laura is on the phone. Laura Ramos is on the phone. She is one of our members. This is the full scope. We have 8 state agencies. Each one has a delegated representative from that state agency to participate. And then, so just one from each state agency. And then we have the non-state membership. This is not the slide that I thought I was showing. Oh, good. This one. Okay, so this is the non-state membership. So we have, can you guys still see my slides?
Yeah, we can see them.
Okay, it says, okay, so tribal representatives, the ones that are in law are the asterisks here. So technical assistance providers, community-based organizations, public, local government, experts in land use and water. And and then we added the other groups, representative groups, because we thought it was just very important for them to be at the table to talk about water. And then, and so this is the group here, and we have 2 from each group is the idea, because 2 just doesn't seem like enough, but then you start getting a bigger and bigger group, and that we made 26 our cutoff. And it's still a pretty big group, but it does form nice size work groups, which we've done over last year and this year. And so this kind of put it well. We're in our 3rd year. So this was established in 2023. Those non-state agency members had we invited to the public, if you wanted to participate, to submit a short letter of interest. And then we tried to get representation from across the state, so different geographic areas, and not have just expertise clumped up too much. So we wanted some diversity and perspectives. And it seems like we have a pretty good group, I think. And so in our 1st year, we were really trying to figure out what we were doing, because it was really, we wanted it to be member-led and to get this group engaged, and just how we would put together a process that would work. Because that wasn't specified in the law of what all the different kind of governance process was. And so year 2 was really working on what does it look like? Okay, they decided they wanted to make recommendations. So how could that be? How can we do that with a 26-member group? And then what direction would we go based on what they had described as issues they were interested in 2023? And so by the end of 2024, they came up with a set of recommendations that they had voted on and approved. They went through several meetings where they worked through them together. Some things dropped off, some things kind of ended up bridging together so well they became a single recommendation. And then there was one that kind of was gonna wait till this year to discuss it more. And so now here we are in year 3, and we've got this system in place. So I think it feels like things are moving more efficiently, though of course we have higher expectations, and but it's exciting. So for example, the recommendations that were put forward from 2024 were and then let's see here. These were the ones that were approved by the members. So 1 through 6 here, they had these different focus areas or work groups. So they were ones that some were very interested in drought relevant data. There was another group that was really interested in drought preparedness for domestic wells, and another group that kind of, and there was a lot of overlap of people, but interested in the narrative around drought and the definition, and just how messaging around that is created challenges in California. across different sectors and in different regions and it could even be neighbor to neighbor. So so that's how the things were binned. And but what the recommendations ended up looking into was, so these drought indicators and metrics was to do, let's see, I think I have, gives you some scope. So this one was to develop a practical drought early warning system to improve information for the local and state drought management actions. And I mean, this is something that's really been needed, and it was, I think it was really helpful to have this group across user types be able to talk about the needs. And then, and so then what we do with this and with the other ones is we're going to track how they go. So this task force does not have authority or bandwidth to collectively implement any single recommendation that they make. But what we do have is so as DWR, we're going to continue to host them, and we can help track what we hear and can pull together of who's doing what along each of these recommendations, and then report it back to the DRIP collaborative so that they can follow what's going on, and we can have some tracking of how are these going? Are they filling the gaps that they were intended to? And what else is needed, and kind of how it's going? That these are, some of them are very long-term pieces of the challenges, but they're really important. So I mean, due to time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I mean, we also have one of the other recommendations was a voluntary community-based well monitoring program. And this one came from our public member, Suzanne Pecci. But the group was really excited about it. And it can be one of the things that's really missing from groundwater monitoring in California, besides all the fractured rock areas, but of course that's difficult to monitor, is that often the monitoring isn't getting to the domestic well depth. And so they don't have access to when things are dropping locally, and if they can send alert or communicate with anybody or just be on watch. And so having this type of program can help empower local private well owners just understand their groundwater better. So we're looking into that and tracking it. So let's see, I'm not going to go into the other ones, but this one is about roles and responsibilities of domestic wells. What we have for 2025 this year is we have 3 main focus areas, these top 3. So one is reducing ecosystem impacts from drought. And there's the other focus areas on land use planning for drought resiliency, and sort of that nexus between water planning and land use planning, and then water infrastructure and planning. So we've had work groups for these top 4 here. This 5th one is sort of in the works, and the cross-cutting themes was just trying to figure out how to incorporate different themes that really cut across everything. And of course, all these other ones have overlaps too, but climate adaptation and nature-based solutions, for example, is a big interest of the group, but they really cut into all of these. And so how to deal with those, and incorporate them. So that is what's going on right now. Is we're planning for the next in-person meeting. We have 3 big full in-person meeting or full member meetings per year. So May 16th is our first one of the year. We've had virtual work groups so far that have been for each of these topics, but the next meeting is May 16th. And the one after that, I think, is July 18th, and the one after that is in October. And so October, the hope is that we can get some of these at least to recommendations where they can approve or not, but we'll be working on those in May. So that was the whirlwind tour for what I've been working on, and I would be happy to answer any questions now or follow up. There are a couple links right here, and I'll certainly follow up with some other links if anybody's interested.
Well, thank you very much, Julie, for sharing your work with us. Yeah, so yeah, we still have about 10 minutes for questions. So if you have a question, just go ahead and ask. Thank you. Anybody? Oh, I think Greg has his hand. Greg, please go ahead and ask a question.
Hey, Julie. Thanks for this presentation. I guess I had two questions. One is I'm just always curious, like how big is the team? Maybe you mentioned up front who's working on this because it's an impressive amount of work. The second is a question and a comment. I'm just finding the term state smalls to be increasingly like very unhelpful to in communication especially, but I'm wondering if we could do anything about that because I really think it's not helping people understand the issue in multiple ways. So I don't know if you can comment on that in an official or unofficial capacity, but I'd love some perspective.
Okay. Well, first question in terms of the size of the group. So you mean like our staff? So for the Water Justice Office, there are 3 of us, but we get a lot of work done, and we have a lot of help and connect to the other divisions inside of DWR. That's just amazing. So from our sustainable groundwater management group, the water use efficiency branch, which is part of the Division of Regional Assistance, the regional offices. So we work together. This is the main things that our water justice group is in charge of. We also have, for the DRIP collaborative, we have a lot more help for that with a drought coordinator, Anthony Navasero at DWR, also works on the DRIP collaborative, and we have a whole team for helping develop that. So we have consultants and that also help with the facilitation, and then also the executive development team. They're fantastic. So yes. And then we have some wonderful people helping with the tool development, because it's very technical on how to get the back end of the data properly into the DWR data standards has been really important to us from the very beginning. And so luckily we've been working with a group from the State Water Project Office that is fantastic on that. So in terms of the word state small, or the term, yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to talk about state smalls and small water systems in the same venue, because most people don't know the difference, but there's a huge difference in the regulatory oversight that they have to abide by, or state smalls don't really have any, and small systems have a ton. So I'm happy to work with you on brainstorming other ways to talk about it. I think that those terms might be under, I don't know, federal definitions. Oh, Michelle's here. Thanks.
Yeah. My understanding is though that no one uses the term state small outside of California, and the terms that other states use are clearer, or like help distinguish what we're talking about. That's just, and it's also, yeah, I know when you talk to anyone who's not following this stuff closely, they think you're talking about the small regulated, 15 to whatever, 500 or, whatever they have in their head. So it's really a purely terminology, but I think it really matters for people understanding.
Yeah, I feel like it's taken me years to follow all this. And then the water code has more recently put in under SB 552 small water suppliers. And that's not in the water board's code, or they talk about small water systems. And so yeah. we could talk about that again sometime. But we don't have the authority. I mean, it's probably more through the water board, but would be happy to participate in that.
Yeah, understood. I'll just, bother Michelle about it, looks like.
You're coming?
Yeah, I had a question. It's really thanks for the presentation. I hadn't understood all the details on the drought vulnerability tool, so it was really great to see the scope of that effort. I'm curious if you are sort of tracking or at least have a sense for how that tool is being used. I mean, it strikes me that it could have a lot of applications in different contexts outside of even just sort of drought resilience planning. And are there ways in which you're actually assessing the way that people are interacting with that with that site, and do you have a sense of how it's being integrated, I guess, in decision making in the water space at least?
Well, we mostly track how the counties are using it because I felt like they were our main audience of the user's immediate need. I mean, there's probably some back end way to see how many people and who use it. It gets a lot of clicks from that, but I haven't dived into that. Most is we go to the county task force meetings for the drought task force and then watch how they react to their baseline risk assessment that's been put together for them or that they've been looking into using the tool. And then we watch them tear it apart one way or another. And then I learn like what we should do for the next time. And but there's a lot more that could be done to look at it as, should we be looking at it as immediate, or how could we look at it under climate change conditions or scenarios, or for land use planning in the future. But yeah, I can try to look at some of those like back end things.
Just curious. Yeah, no, I mean, I understood the county was your primary audience, and that's great that they're reacting in that way. I mean, it shows that they're engaged, and I've had the same experience trying to do statewide decision support tools. Are there any other questions from the group?
Yes, there's none. So that's that one. Unless anybody has Greg or you have anything to add, we could all thank Julie for spending time with us here.
Yeah, thank you so
Great.
much. Wonderful presentation.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks
Monica
again.
has a question. Monica has a question. Please go ahead, Monica.
I think that's clapping, but it may be a
It's
question.
the
Oh.
clapping icon.
Yeah, I was just clapping, just appreciating. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, my apologies, guys. Zoom and I are not very good friends.
You did a great job.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right,
Thank
bye,
you,
everyone.
Julie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. This was so interesting. Thanks.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Julie, I'll let you know when the YouTube is uploaded.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks. Yeah, you too. Okay, bye-bye.